Sims, how's it going? It's Shani today here. Welcome to Sunday, and of course that means that today's video is another Sims video. Now I do want to start this video off by saying I am usually a very good person to my Sims. I don't usually treat them this poorly, but with that being said, I'm probably going to sim hell for this video. You may or may not remember the Sims that I made in last week's video. If you haven't, you can check that out in the cards right now. A brief recap on that family in case you didn't watch that episode, even though I highly recommend you do. We have Norma, who's the mermaid, Reino, who is the family vampire, Courtney, Dominique, Yahir, Deshawn, Oswaldo, and Jimmy Legs. Now, they all have very different traits, very different personalities, and they were created with a very specific intention and purpose in mind. Today's video is all about how many ways to kill your Sims in The Sims 4. I do cover all the way up to the Sims 4 Realm of Magic, so consider this your disclaimer ahead. There are going to be spoilers. If you do want to play and find out these methods yourself, please do not watch the remainder of the video. I do also want to say that is going to be a lengthy one, so for your ease of access, I have left the timestamps to the different deaths below in case there's a very specific one that you want to find the method to. I do just want to say that Sims 4 does carry this age rating, and it does involve a lot of mature themes, and obviously within this video there are going to be many mature themes of how to die. So take that with a pinch of salt, and if you are watching this and you're a little bit more impressionable, then just maybe click away, maybe watch it with someone older than you, I don't know. Some other disclaimers will include that I am playing on Sims 4 on console, but I am playing with a keyboard and mouse to avoid any confusion, but that does mean that certain packs aren't available to me, but I will cross that bridge when I get there. Finally, I do want to disclose that cheats were used in the making of this video. I tried as much as possible to keep it as raw and as real and as legitimate as possible, but certain instances really did just require cheats, and I did use some vampiric powers in the episode as well, but I will outline everything on how to go about this without using cheats, although some of them are really difficult without them. But that should be all the disclaimers out of the way. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this very morbid, probably most sadistic video I've ever made in my life. Let the killing begin? ? Now, to start off, I have started with the very obvious need decay related deaths, and that's going to start off our video with killing Courtney by means of starvation. Now, this is obviously a very low hunger trait, and some points to note around that is that your Sim will become very hungry and then eventually does become ravenous. Once you reach that ravenous moodlet, then it will tell you will die of starvation in a certain amount of hours. So this is basically you locking your Sim up in a room, taking away anything that can give them any points towards their hunger. I am a gracious Sim overlord, and I decided to give her a shower so whenever she pees herself that she can shower, but I still starved her to death. But that is just one of the quickest, easiest, and probably most painless ways, is you just lock them in a room and you forget about them. Moving on to your low energy need. Now, you will need a pool or body of water for this, as with the very beginning and the dawn of the Sim age, you have always been able to kill your Sim by drowning. Now, previously, the good old deleting all the ladders trick would be the demise of your Sim, but the Sims 4 have evolved and they have learned how to climb in and out of the pool without the use of any apparatus. Now, they will be able to jump back in without any form of ladders, but I do recommend that you build a wall around your pool. Choose a Sim that you are willing to sacrifice to the low energy need and have them swim a bunch of laps until they eventually cannot and they die of drowning due to being exhausted. If they were exhausted outside of the pool, they would pass out, they would be on the floor for a couple of minutes and then regain for a little bit, and then you'd have to find them a place to sleep. With the pool, obviously that's not exactly going to be an option and you will end up drowning. A fun little fact that I do also include in this little bit of gameplay here of Jimmy Legs dying is the fact that he and Oswaldo had declared each other as enemies, and as you can see here, Oswaldo is very happy and very ecstatic about the death of his enemy, or the demise of his enemy. Now, the next one doesn't actually fall under need decay since it isn't really a Sim motor motive that will get replenished, but it does relate to elder sims and being overly exerted or doing strenuous activity. Now, the personal favorite way to do this is to work out, get the really uncomfortable moodlet, and then go and woohoo, because sims are always keen to woohoo for some odd reason. For obvious reasons, the game is going to stop you from making them work out any further. They can no longer push the limits if they were an active sim in their younger years. But what you are able to do, and it's what sims always seem to be keen for, is a good old-fashioned woohoo. Now, I have had this glitch on me in the past as well, so sometimes if you do let them fall asleep after committing the deed or after finishing the act, if you do let them fall asleep, sometimes the moodlets do glitch a bit, and as you can see here, Norma just jumps straight back to life. Even though she should have died, she turned into an energetic little sim due to lot traits. But try this a couple of times. If it doesn't work first time around, it didn't for me, and eventually did manage to off Norma by ways of overexertion through woohoo, and I do believe that there are worse ways to go than that. Moving on to a variety of skills-based deaths. Now, these can either be very high skills needed or very low skills needed, but I do quite like the grouping of using your brain and your career to your advantage or your demise. Starting off with electrocution. In comparison to other sims, you actually need to electrocute your sims twice in order to be electrocuted to death. So take your sim who has a very low handiness skill, get them to repair that electronic. In my case, I used a PC. Now they will get that dazed motive. Once you have that, you have that allotted amount of time in order to electrocute your sims again, so that they're already a little bit singed and they're dazed already, and the warning already says you shouldn't mess with electronics for a while until that motive disappears. All you need to do is find yourself a second electronic thing that needs repairing, repair it the exact same way, and finally, once that object has been repaired as well and restored to its former glory, your sim will pass away from electrocution. This next one requires you to have a low cooking skill, but it's not the death that you're automatically probably thinking of. The death that I'm now covering is the death by consuming poorly prepared pufferfish. Now, to die by means of pufferfish, you would have already need to learn this recipe. The recipe is able to be learned via one of the food stalls. It looks like the one that you can see on screen now, and you are in no ways in danger of buying the pufferfish from the food stall, since it will always be excellently prepared. You can enjoy that meal. You need to learn the recipe. It'll give you the little congratulations if it's the first recipe you're learning for the Sims City Living. If it's not, it'll tell you how many of the dishes you still have to go and which one you've just learnt, and you will of course get the little moodlet for defying death. Now that you've learnt that recipe, however, and you can take your newly found recipe skill back to your own home with your terrible cooking skills, you can prepare it yourself. You'll find it under the cook menu, and you can create as you can choose whichever serving you want. Obviously, the more servings you make, the more sims you can kill, so if you want to go all Arya Stark on this, then awesome. But besides the point, once you have prepared your poorly prepared pufferfish, then you can also see all of the warnings. So it's not like something you can do on accident here if you're not aware of it. It will give you all the warnings to say don't eat something that's poorly prepared, or don't eat it in a bad mood. So what does Shiny go and do? She goes ahead and makes her very sad, distressed sim eat a very poorly prepared dish anyways. Obviously, all for the goodness of the video, but I'm very sorry, yeah, here. Next, you're going to need a high level of gardening skill, or you can just use some cheats, but I'll get into that in a little bit. The method that I'm going to be referring to next is, of course, the cow plant, which requires a bunch of splicing and dicing of plants you have already grown or attained throughout the world, or you can just find it by fishing or digging or exploring space. However, the method that I do cover in this video relates to gardening, since it is the most tried and tested method. It doesn't rely on the chance of you coming across a cow plant berry within the world, be it fishing or digging or exploring space. Right, so there are a couple steps involved in attaining a cow plant and growing one yourself. Alternatively, you can bring up your cheats console and you can type in BB bb.show hidden objects, search cow plants under the build and buy menu, plant it, and you're set to go in a couple of days once it reaches maturity. But should you want to grow one yourself, this is the method you're going to follow. First thing you're going to do is you're going to need to grow a snapdragon plant as well as a strawberry plant. Once those have reached maturity, you can take cuttings from both of them, graft the one into the other. That means that they will be able to produce both fruits on the same plant, but will also produce something new. In this case, a snapdragon and a strawberry together will produce a dragon fruit. Once you have harvested that dragon fruit, you need to plant it because you need a dragon fruit plant for the next step. Next step, you're going to take your snapdragon, which you already have, and your dragon fruit. You're going to graft both of those, or at least take cuttings from those, graft one into the other, and this will then produce the cow plant berry. It's very cute, it's very sweet, it looks very bovine, and you do need to go ahead and plant that. Please note, I am in a penthouse, which means I have no terrain around me, so I did need to use the planting pots, and then because of the size that the cow plant ends up being, I did need to use the bigger planter, which is usually what you use for trees or anything anyways, but just note that the size does matter with the planters when it comes to the cow plant. But then once your plant has reached full maturity, this is the state where the cow plant is safe. You can engage with it, you can play with it, and you can feed it. Now, it is very important, if you don't want to die by means of cow plants, keep your cow plant fed with every 12 hours. If it's not fed, it will produce a cake on the end of its tongue. If you know this from previous Sims, it's pretty much almost the same, except there are a couple of extra steps in terms of needing to kill your Sim. Now, once your cow plant is hungry and it produces the cake, you can have a Sim go and opt to either feed it or to eat the cake. Obviously, for the purposes of the video, I did choose to have Dominique eat the cake, and there's one of two things that'll happen here. Well, there's one of two steps that you need to follow here. Initially, you will get eaten by the cow plant and it'll spit you back out, and its udder will become full, and it would have drained your essence. That drained moodlet on your Sim will last for 2 days. Now, in the next 2 days of having this drained emotion, you need to eat the cow plant. Will need to try eat the cow plant cake again, and this will result in imminent death. Now, thanks to me having free will enabled on my Sims, and this is also something to take with caution here, is my Sim, who happened to come strolling out of nowhere. I didn't actually even see him in the background because I actually thought that Dominique had glitched out. I even reset her because I couldn't work out why with her drained emotive she still couldn't eat the cow plants. I eventually reset her. In came Yahir and got himself eaten. Anyway, he had his happiness drained, and previously Dominique had her playfulness drained. Now, because of that, I did need to wait a couple of extra hours, and once the cow plant finally presented its cake again, had Yahir eat that cake once again, and he did get consumed. Now, the elixir that will be available from your cow plant now is going to be the elixir of life, and it will bring all your already aged pieces in your current life phase down to 0, and will basically extend your Sim's life. With the Sims 4 seasons, you will get the skill to make flower arrangements, and this can actually lead to you scenting something, or scenting one of your arrangements with the scent of death. Now, in order to do this, you will need the death flower in your inventory and a very high level of flower arrangement skills. So to make the death flower, if you're not willing to go the bb.hidden objects way to find it yourself, it's going to cost you, I think, 1,200 simoleons. Then you need to take a cherry tree and you need to take an apple tree, graft those together, that'll produce the pomegranate. At the same time, you will need to graft a lily flower and a snapdragon flower together to produce an orchid. You then need to graft your pomegranate and your orchid together, and that will produce the death flower. If you do have Realm of Magic installed, there is also the chance of finding that at the alchemy supply store. So if you are looking for the death flower in other means, then you can always go find it that way. But once you have a death flower in your possession, make sure it's in the Sims inventory that has the high level flower arrangement skills. Choose to make any form of arrangements as long as it comes out excellent. You can then choose to scent with a rare flower. You choose your death flower, and that will give you the scent of death, and it's actually quite eerie and it looks like a Dementor from Harry Potter. With this arrangement now that is scented with death, if you gift it to any Sim and they aren't an elder, they will just simply age up into their next age phase. So if they're a young adult, they'll turn into an adult. If they're an adult, they'll turn into an elder. However, if you gift a arrangement that is centered with death to an elder, it will kill them. And quite sadly, that's once again Norma's department, and I ended up probably killing Norma the most in this episode. Useful thing to note, however, with the death flower as well, it's not only for killing sims, but if you happen to have it in your inventory and a sim in front of you has just died, you are able to present the Grim Reaper with that death flower, and it'll bring that demised sim back to life. So good little thing to have if you aren't looking to kill your sims, but if you are, then Grim Reaper doesn't need flowers, you can move on with your day. Sticking with the low skill sets, and this is probably the one that you initially thought of when I mentioned the low cooking skill to start off this section, is death by means of fire. Now, there is several ways to die by means of fire, and I will cover them all in the following grouping. But to start off, obviously, the dead obvious one is if you have a low cooking skill, there is a chance of you causing a fire on either a stove or a grill. Sticking with the fire and skill set Venn diagram, we are going to move into something that is available with Get to Work, and that is of course the sim ray. Once you're in the scientist career track, you will need to invent the sim ray, and then you will eventually need to give it the transform object upgrade. Once you try and transform an object, there is the chance of having that object catch on fire, but then also really useful, you have a very cool freeze ray to freeze the fire and put it out very quickly and efficiently. Continuing on with the methods on how to kill your sim by fire, if you set off fireworks in your house inside, you will of course start that fire. Now, ironically enough, the sim that you see on screen here now, Oswaldo, is the only sim that I actually killed by means of fire for this playthrough. The rest all ended up either getting extinguished or extinguishing themselves for purposes of saving time, effort, and energy. But ironically enough, something to note as well is there is always a risk when extinguishing another sim. You could get too close, the fire could spread to you, and you could also find yourself caught alight. Fortunately, Sims 4 does have the option to extinguish yourself, but just take heed when trying to extinguish another sim that is on fire that there is a chance that you could catch fire yourself. Moving on to laundry day, if you are not regularly cleaning out the lint tray of your dryer, this does eventually, inevitably, cause a fire as well. Fireplaces have been a hazard towards your Sims well-being all the way since Sims 1, but I can go out on a limb here and say that this was probably one of the most surprising discoveries I made throughout the entirety of this video, was the fact of how difficult it actually is to get a fire to start due to a fireplace. Clearly they've nerfed the chances of the fire starting by means of fireplace by a lot, because this video took me 5 days to film, 5 IRL days, and it took literal sim weeks for a fire to eventually start. I had placed objects in front of the fire. I had placed objects inside the fire. I specifically made them wooden objects. Eventually, I had 2 fireplaces to double my chances, and still these fireplaces just carried on burning very bright until, however, and I don't know if this was just completely by coincidence or if I overloaded the game itself. I don't know. I haven't done extensive research into it, but when I had 4 Sims warming themselves by a fire simultaneously, suddenly 3 of them went up in flames, all willy-nilly, and I thought that was very ironic because it had taken literal sim weeks for that fire to finally be started by fireplaces, but it is nice to know that they aren't as much of a hazard as they previously were in other Sims games. A little bit of a surprise that I encountered when doing the jungle aspect of this video is that you can actually come across a bunch of fireflies, which will also set your sim on fire. Don't worry, you are able to self-extinguish, but I honestly was not expecting that option since it wasn't mentioned in any of the guides anywhere, so yay for finding out things that surprised me. If your sim has the inclination for mischief, you are able to sabotage the Christmas tree. Now, this isn't the pre-made, very pretty, very nice decorated Christmas tree that you can buy in buy mode. It is the do-it-yourself Christmas tree. So there's the option to decorate it with garlands, with lights, with baubles, with the topper, with the tree, whatever. But the option for your mischievous Sims is always going to be to sabotage this. Once your tree has been sabotaged, whenever you light that going forward, it will always cause a fire. Kicking off the weather-related demise, we can start off by freezing your Sims to death. All you need to do is put them outside during the colder weather and make sure that they're wearing the warmer weather's clothing. They will eventually freeze to death, but you will initially be warned twice, if I'm not mistaken, that your Sim is freezing and that you need to step in and make sure that you're saving them. The next weather-related method is being struck by lightning. Now, there is a very specific reason why I added a mermaid to the household when creating this Sim family, was the fact that mermaids have the option to summon thunderstorms, because thunderstorms, surprisingly enough, aren't as common as you expect them to be. Good to note that your Sims will automatically run inside during a thunderstorm, so if you have a Sim outside who doesn't have the storm chaser trait, then you are going to need to physically lock them outside and lock any form of doors that allow them to go inside. Your storm chaser aspiration reward can be bought in the aspiration reward store. I think it costs you 1,000 points. But that will let you enjoy the storms firstly, and also you will not automatically run inside for no reason. Now, during the week of filming this, because this took an IRL week to film this video and all the different methods, I tried this method the most. Any opportunity that I have while I was waiting for other Sims to die from other causes, I was summoning thunderstorms and I was leaving Sims to stand outside. I left Sims that enjoy the weather out there. I left Sims that didn't enjoy the weather out there. I had Sims standing doing nothing. I had Sims standing doing stuff while they were outside. Nothing ended up happening. In the time of having those thunderstorms, during any given thunderstorm, I maybe saw actual lightning bolts hit my property maybe 3 times out of the entire half-hour storm, and that's actual real-life half-hour storms. So, when it comes to getting hit by lightning, that is when I called the cheats in. Now, there are a bunch of options that require you to use mods for this. I eventually, thanks to Sims Online, if I'm not mistaken, I did find a method that doesn't require any mods, and I was able to use on console as well. I will leave a link to that guide in the description below, but in essence, you get your Sim ID, you then say the lightning needs to strike an object, you insert the Sim ID, and then it will hit your Sim for you. Now, with my newfound power, I immediately struck Courtney with lightning, and boom, bang, what do I find? She actually enjoyed it. So I decided to hit her with lightning again, and ironically enough, there is a small chance of being given superpowers to be able to summon lightning when getting hit by lightning, and I ended up giving Courtney superpowers. So I was like, awesome, I can now summon lightning to hit another Sim. No. That's not the case. It just hits the ground that Sim happens to be standing on. So I then thought, okay, since they've been given the powers, I cannot kill them by means of lightning, so I'm going to have to bring every single Sim outside and hit each of them by lightning until someone dies. Boy, was I in for a treat. I then proceeded to strike Yahir. I struck him twice. He ended up getting the same powers, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be the next set of Incredibles. But eventually, I now comically started striking him with lightning just because I could. And eventually, by the 6th time of being hit by lightning in quick succession, he eventually died of electrocution. Now, the chances of this actually happening in your actual Sim game without form of manipulation is probably the rarest death that I've come across so far, because the chance of you getting hit by lightning to start off with is super rare, and then the chance of getting hit enough times to cause death, I don't know, this seems very unlikely, but I will be leaving that cheat guide in the description below. You have the powers for 12 hours, which are quite cool. Then, just as much as you can freeze your Sim to death, they can also die of overheating. So exactly the same method, you just need to have your Sims standing outside during a heat wave or the warmer seasons, but put them in winter or cooler climate clothing. Something that I do need to point out with this is that make sure that your game settings have enabled that temperature will be able to affect your Sims, because you can turn that off. If you don't want to go the route of forking out a bunch of cash for a Sims 4 expansion pack, there is the Spa Day Sims 4 game pack, which obviously is a little bit cheaper, but also has its own temperature-related death. Now, if you have purchased Spa Day and you go to the spa, you are able to have your Sims sit in a steam room. And you guessed it, if you leave them in there for long enough, they will die by means of overexposure to the steam, which is very much the same as dying by the heat, but it, of course, is a very different method altogether. I also, ironically enough, through this edit, discovered that I actually killed Deshaun twice by means of overheating him, and I'm very sorry. Moving into Jungle Adventure, this gives you the option of having your Sim die by means of poisoning. So there are two methods of becoming poisoned in the Sims 4 Jungle Adventure. The first is by getting bitten by an insect, which you can see Oswaldo's done here because he was trying to clear the gate. And then the other method, here unfortunately is trying to walk through the gate of gas or poisonous gas that hasn't been disabled yet. The spiders one is a little bit more of chance than the gas is a definite, but of course you need to progress through the jungle enough to be able to get through to a tomb that has a gas booby trap enabled. So once you've either been bitten or you've walked through the gas, you will get the icky moodlet, which is going to last you 12 hours. Once you have that icky moodlet, you have a lot of time to work with in order to find an antidote. There's a bunch of hints that will get swung at you as well throughout the progress of leading up to their death, but should you not want to sit in for a little bit of a ride, you're in for a long 92 hours. Once your feeling icky emote has passed its 12 hours, you will then be told, oh no, you weren't able to fight this off and you have in fact become poisoned. Your poisoned emote and your poisoned motive will now last 3 whole days. During this time, you'll be able to see the splotches on the skin turn green. You'll be able to notice that your Sims are going to be belching a lot. Once those 3 days have concluded, you then become overly poisoned, which is another moodlet which will last an additional 8 hours. Once those 8 hours have concluded, however, you will die from poisoning, and obviously the two various methods, once again, being bitten by an insect or walking through the gas. They both end the same, they both run the same amount of time, and it is a very long 92 hours, so you have more than enough time to find the antidote. It's $1,000 on the PC if you really need it to be a quick fix, but that is poisoning your Sims with Sims 4 Jungle Adventure. Moving into the undead and eternal world of vampires with Sims 4 Vampires, the game pack. If you leave your vampire out in the sun and they don't have any protection to the sun, of course they're gonna burn up and die. And that happens relatively quickly as well. It's more or less the same time as what overheating and freezing to death takes, except you don't get a warning. Your vampire just really starts moaning and complaining, and obviously their energy will eventually deplete and they will burn up and die. Now, ways to avoid this is keep your vampire inside, only go out at night. There are also the power in the skill tree to be resistant to the sunlight. And also, if you go out when it's cloudy, then that'll help as well. Speaking of vampires, however, Raina did come in handy for the next lot of deaths because, quite frankly, they are probably the most difficult to attain. Death by extreme emotion is a new way that was introduced with The Sims 4, that you can kill your Sims off by either being extremely angry, extremely embarrassed, or so playful to the point of hysteria. I honestly tried to do these on my own without any form of cheats or manipulation, but I ended up hitting a brick wall every single time, and that's where Raina came in. A vampire has the ability to influence emotions around them if they have that skill. The higher your skill is, the wider the range of burst of that emotional influence can go, but I ended up using her to influence the initial emotion. So to start off with embarrassment, some tips would be, if you want to try and get there on your own, choose a sim who has a very, very full bladder and will eventually need to relieve themselves. Eventually they pee themselves, they will get that embarrassed moodlet, and then you need to feed on top of that. There are a bunch of various ways to feed on top of that. Having your sim shower and have someone walk in on them, or having your sim walk in on someone else showering, will give you two variants of basically the same interaction. You can also play music in front of other sims really badly. You can also have really awkward encounters. But I got my sims to the point of being mortified, and clearly I didn't keep them in that state for long enough without the use of the vampire, and he ended up having a little bit of a moment. I thought he was going to die, and then he eventually just went back to being very embarrassed. So that's where Reina came in. I used her to influence the emotions, got my sim to the mortified level, and eventually did pass away from embarrassment. Moving on to hysteria. Getting your sim so playful that they become hysterical. Now, of the three that are emotionally based, this is probably the easiest, since laughter and playfulness is a happy emotion. So you can actually kind of tweak this if you're willing to spend some of your aspiration rewards on a happy potion. Then that will boost your whatever mood you are. The happy mood will always boost whatever else you are feeling that time. So if you're playful and you drink your happiness potion, the happiness potion gives you 100 plus points, and that will be boosting whatever mood that you're feeling. Get them to do a bunch of jokes, get them to watch funny TV, get them to play in the bubble bath, whatever you need to get your sim to very playful and then eventually hysterical with that extra boost. Go ahead, go do that. Or if you have access to a vampire like I do, then just influence emotions to be playful, and then that will get you to the hysterical levels. And then eventually, if your sim is having enough of a good time, they will die from laughter. Final emotion that you can kill your sims with is anger. Now, I spent a lot of time trying to get my sims riled up enough against one another, getting into fights, getting into brawls, getting them to the points of anger where they're eventually enraged. Unfortunately, never reached that point. I couldn't sustain it for long enough to get them to that level. So Reina once again came in, but because of her very high skill level, or the being in the third tier of this power, she has a very wide blast radius, and I ended up making a lot of sims angry at once. They were all enraged, which was easy because then I just made them all fight with one another, and eventually, instead of having the sim I was aiming on having killed, another sim passed away, and both of them passed away together, basically of the same thing. They were basically mad at one another. But that is death by cardiac explosion. They got so angry that their hearts actually exploded. At time of filming, the most recent release for The Sims 4 was the inclusion of a Realm of Magic, and that adds a new life phase, or a new life state, to the game in the form of Spellcasters. Now, Spellcasters, under their needs, have an orb that track their magical charge. Now, the more magic you start performing, the more that charge will fill up. Certain charge levels are good because it means your magic is more powerful, but eventually it may take a couple of attempts, so keep your sims dueling, keep your sims casting spells. Eventually that will reach critical levels, and eventually your sim will be fried due to the spellcaster overload. You'll notice I've moved away from my dumb ways to die household for this little bit of the video, but that's because I didn't actually have the Realm of Magic pack installed in the initial creation of The Sims, so I just decided to go with one of the pre-made Sims families. Anyway, I thought you guys would forgive me for this little one, because hey, magic, look, haha! Sticking with the somewhat magical, in Romantic Garden stuff, there is a wishing well that you're able to purchase, and you can actually have very different outcomes with this wishing well. There's a lot of different stuff that you can wish for, and a lot of different outcomes depending on the mood that the well is in and what your sim is feeling as well. I would actually very much like to do a separate video on the wishing well itself, so let me know in the comments if you are interested in something like that. But besides the point, one of the options is when you wish full youthful vigor, it will actually troll you and turn your sim into a ghost, therefore leaving you at the exact same age that your sim was when making the wish for eternity. So doesn't quite count as a death, but it does give you the immortal / death phase of being a ghost. So I thought I'd include that just because you do turn into a ghost anyway, even though the ghost remains playable. And now we're going to be moving into the honorable mentions portion, just because I either do not have the pack installed or do not have access to the pack. So first on my list is Death by Rabbit Rodent Fever, which can only be achieved on the Sims 4 PC because at time of filming, my first pet stuff is not available on console. Hopefully they bring it to the game in the near future, but as of time of filming, not available for me to buy at all. And yeah, so in order to achieve this, you will need to have the base game on PC, you'll then need to have cats and dogs, and you will also have to have the Sims 4 My First Pets stuff pack. And then you need to buy yourself a hamster. Eventually the hamster will bite you, and then basically wait for the rabbit rodent fever to take over your body and kill you. Secondly, and I'm adding an extra disclaimer despite having all the disclaimers at the beginning of this video, this is a disclaimer for Strangerville. I don't have it installed. It is available on console, but I do not have Strangerville installed. But if you want to play the Strangerville story for yourself, then skip this little part of the video because this is going to spoil the story for you. But throughout the story of the Strangerville progression, you'll eventually get to the final boss where you need to fight the mother plant or the plant mother or whatever it's called. And if you choose to go this alone, the plant will eat you and it'll kill you. The final honorable mention has to go to the death by a rocket ship crash. Now, I tried this so many times, different skill sets, different sims, different moods. You basically, the whole idea is that it's basically one of the methods of being caught on fire by means of rocket crash will start a fire and then you'll die from the fire. But I could not get that to happen. I could not get that. Any sim with different rocket science skills, whether it be really high, really low, what's supposed to happen is when your rocket ship is sabotaged by a mischievous sim with either vegetable or fruit shoved up into the exhaust pipe or exhaust boost or whatever, it is supposed to guarantee a rocket ship crash. That crash is then supposed to cause a fire. Your sim dies by fire, but it's via the means of a rocket crash. I tried this. I sabotaged my rocket, and I tried a high science rocket skills, low science rocket skills, no science rocket skills, good moods, bad moods, high motives, low motives, about to fall asleep, not about to fall asleep. I tried this so many times and crashed my rocket so many various ways, and I always got the same message afterwards saying, but hey, any crash that you can walk away from, and no fire was caused. I actually took to the internet and I trolled Reddit for a while, trolled through different forums, trying to find out if anyone else was able to get death by rocket. And everyone was saying, listen, we placed flammables all around the rocket. We did all of the different methods, all the different modes, different types of rockets that you can unlock. And unfortunately, it just doesn't seem to happen. So death by rocket gets an honorable mention because it's supposed to be one of the ways to die. But it's either been fixed and it's not a way to die, or it's just glitched. So I don't know, but that's why it goes under the honorable mentions. Then finally, to wrap this all up, if you are not a sadistic sim overlord and you have let your sims live long and happy lives and you have aging enabled, your sim will eventually pass away from old age. This is probably the most dignified way to have your sims die, but it does take obviously the most amount of time, depending on how long you've set your life cycle or your lifespan for your sims. But your sim eventually will die of old age, pass away, say peace out to the world, and will unfortunately continue the circle of life within your family. So an interesting thing to note here is that every single life phase except for elders are able to age up by means of birthday cake and blowing out the birthday candles, but an elder, that option eventually is no longer available and you will have to wait for them to pass away by themselves. With that very, very final note of a very peaceful death for your elderly sims, that is the video of the all-encompassing ways of all the current ways at time of filming ways to kill your sims in The Sims 4. Definitely the most sadistic video I've ever filmed in my life. I hope you have enjoyed. Let me know if you want to see more stuff in the future, but that is going to be it from me. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did manage to watch until the end, thank you so much. I appreciate you very dearly. If you just skipped through the different time frames as well, then awesome. I hope this video helped you in some way, shape, or form to kill your sims some way or another. And yeah, that is going to be the video. I'm going to leave this one there. I hope you did enjoy. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe if you are new around here. Remember that we all human differently, and I'll see you guys again soon. Sul.